So we had The Lovely Bones, and it's by Alice Sebold. Okay, so this is a summary of the book. So the date was December 6th, 1973. The girl's name was Susie Salmon, and she was raped and murdered when she was 14 years old. Throughout the whole entire point of view of the book is from Susie's heaven, I guess you can say. And then she learns, in her heaven, she sees how her family was affected with her sister, Lindsay. She uses more of fitness and her boyfriend to get away with the idea and to cope with her sister's death. Her brother, Buckley, he was excluded basically from the family and no one really paid attention to him. The father was being really paranoid with the idea of knowing who the murderer was, and the mother was an adulteress. So she sees her true love, Ray Sings, develop another relationship with Ruth Connor, who is actually connected with Susie after her death. And she also, but most importantly, what she sees is the patterns of her murderer and how he was somehow affected with her death, but not really, and hence his patterns.
So some vocabulary words that we thought were significant. A penchant, which is a strong or habitual liking for something or a tendency to do something. A subjugation, which is to bring someone or something under control. A clandestine, which is to keep secret. A symposium, an ancient Greek celebration or party. And adultery, which is sexual contact between a married person and someone who is not their spouse.
And then like the penchant and subjugation, and also the clandestine has to do with George Harvey, who is the rape and murderer, because he has a really strong liking to kill things. So like if he can't control his feelings, he actually kills animals, otherwise he'll then target his victims, I guess. And then the clandestine is secret that he keeps. The symposium was important because Lindsay goes to a big symposium event because she's actually a gifted child, so she's really smart. And adultery is because of her mom.
So for our characters, we have Susie Salmon. She was the main character basically. She was raped and murdered, and the book is from her point of view mostly. She's your average teenage girl. She's into fashion and she wants to be, or she takes pictures and she wants to be a wildlife photographer when she grew up, and she's always like positive. Has a positive outlook on life and on people.
Can you explain for your classmates what you mean her heaven, because the perspective is from death, so we see not just heaven but her heaven coming up. Can you guys explain that for your classmates?
So when she dies, she goes to her heaven is what she calls it. It's not like what you would think out of the Bible what it would be like, but it's her and her friend Holly who are up there. Well, not her friend, they kind of meet each other up in heaven, and her heaven is like old, or like a schoolyard, and there's other like boys there playing basketball or whatever, but they don't talk really because it's the boys' heaven that they're a part of, and it like grows outer, and like as she lets go of Earth and her people, like her heaven expands and she gets to go to more places. But from the like as she's telling in the book, she can see down on heaven and and down on the people that she's with. So yeah.
And also Taylor will explain it more because that's like one of her big point of views that she has.
George Harvey. The man, the myth, kind of the legend. He is the man who rapes and murders Susie Salmon. He has gone on before Susie and has gotten 6 others. First one was an older lady, but after her, he's gone for the young because it was a lot easier for him to take them and get them alone rather than the adults, and it was easier for him to kill. He's quiet. He's very, very manipulative. He lives by himself in in his own house, big house. Neighbors with the Salmons. He lives in the general area of the Salmons, maybe like 2 or 3 houses down. He builds doll houses to gain his money. Let's see. Yeah, he's very creepy, and since he's done it 6 times before, he's very good at what he does. He's very sly with how he kills her. He even has a notebook with which he has ideas of how to kill and murder people and how to lure them in. He's a very smart, dangerous person that most people would not think about him as being a killer.
When your group was discussing George Harvey, you were all surprised about something when you finally figured it out. What was it?
Well, what bothered me was that he raped and murdered a 6-year-old.
Yeah, that was really.
That was probably what bothered me
Yeah.
the most.
And
And he's only 36 years old.
Yeah, I thought he would be a lot older than that. And in the movie, he was like really thin, and I imagined to be like a beer gut, you know, and like receding hairline. It's like a gross, like nasty man who doesn't
And
do
like
anything.
this is a picture of him in the movie, and I thought the movie did a really good job of representing him. I mean, he even looks really creepy. And
Right, hindsight 2020, but you're just living in the neighborhood. That's your average neighbor, I guess.
Average George.
Average George. Curious George.
Oof. No. No.
what also creeped me out is that he built doll houses. Like of all things that he does for a job, he builds doll houses.
Well, and it was the houses that like they lived in, cause like it was, all the houses were the same, and so they bought these houses to look like the ones that they lived in.
There is a little backstory as to why he builds the doll houses, though. As a child, he grew up, and it was not a good situation at home for him. His father was usually never around, never helped, so he was with his mother most of the time. And they lived in their vehicle. It was his mom and George, and they lived in a vehicle. He learned from a young age how to scavenge. There's mentions of stealing from deceased people from the roadside. Like he had those roadside crosses or burials, and people leave valuables or whatever there. They would go around and steal them. The reason he builds the doll houses, though, is because it helps him connect to what he actually could have been like, to what he pictured in his mind would have been good to have. That's all I got.
Yeah. Okay. So this is Jack Salmon. He's the father of Susie, Lindsay, and Buckley. He's probably the person that takes Susie's death the hardest out of everyone. He's always trying to figure out who murdered his daughter, and eventually he actually does. Right away, he kind of suspects that it's George Harvey until one day he was walking around and taking a walk, and then all of a sudden he sees George Harvey drops a pile of sticks. So then he's like, "Oh, can I help you with that?" And then he brings it to their backyard, and he sees that he's building this big teepee thing. So then that was really suspenseful for him, and they thought that looked very good. So then he asked him what he was building it for, and he said it was for his wife, which he said that his wife's name was Lucy, but then he told the cops that his wife's name was another name. So that really bothered him, and so then he got really too involved with the case, and he tends to forget about the rest of his family. So he really secludes Buckley away from everything. He doesn't really ignore Lindsay, I guess. He's more involved with Lindsay, but he's left to take care of Buckley on his own after Abigail leaves for 7 years in California. And he very slowly lets go of Susie's death, and really at the end of the book, it doesn't really say that he even has coped with it fully yet, but it shows progress, I guess.
So Abigail Salmon, she's the mom of Susie. She was very free-spirited. She wanted to do things on her own. She was emotionally unstable after the death of Susie, and she avoids family contact because it reminds her of Susie. And she commits adultery with one of the cops that was dealing with her case. And she leaves the family for California, but before she left, she asked Jack if she could go to their cabin for 2 weeks, and then she just never came back after that. And she came back 7 years later because of some reason that I shall left unnamed so you can figure out. And then she still stays married to Jack after all this time, even though she still committed adultery and just left their family.
And then we have Lindsay Salmon, who was Susie's younger sister. She basically keeps to herself after Susie's death. She's not that social, but like she wants to understand more of it, so she's strong-headed. She practices with boys' soccer team. She broke into Mr. Harvey's house in search of like some sort of evidence and almost gets caught. She becomes engaged to Samuel Heckler and has a baby with him, so at one point in the book she's like younger, a teen, and then next chapter she's like 21 and like is having a baby and then starting a family. So that was kind of weird, but overall she is a pretty good character in the story.
Main points and the big ideas that we've had.
So my main point was probably George Harvey's routine. Throughout the book you see how he tries to avoid contact with people as much as he can, but he also makes it so that he doesn't look suspicious. And probably one of the main things that he does is he sets alarms. So he has an alarm when to shut his curtains at night. He has an alarm when to turn off his lights at night. And then he goes down into his basement. And then he has an alarm set when he can go back upstairs from sleeping. And so he has all these random alarms set to tell him when he can do something. And it's the same exact routine every day. And actually probably the creepiest thing was that when Lindsay broke into George Harvey's house, she found the journal that he kept of all the stuff that he did with the girls and his plans and how to lure them in. So then she found the cornfield, and I guess we never told him. When Susie was raped and murdered, it was in a cornfield, and what he did was that he dug out this huge hole and made like this big room underground. So then when she was underground, he basically trapped her down there and then killed her. So then Lindsay found the diagram of the whole thing and how he built it. So then she ripped it out and then jumped off the second story of his house and then ran to her dad. And then when she turned it into the police, George Harvey told the police, "Oh, that's just my idea of what happened." Like he's like, I've been investigating this case my whole time. I know it's none of my business, but I feel like as a neighbor, it's a very loving thing to do and try to figure out who did it and how he did it. So we basically told him it was just a random drawing.
Which as a cop is like, I would have taken that as, no, that doesn't make any sense. It's the perfect like map out of what would have happened, so that was...
But instead the police were like, "Oh, do you want to help us out
Yeah.
more with the case then?" They're literally asking the murderer, "Hey, you want to help us figure out who murdered this person?"
You seem to know a lot about this. What? You should become a cop someday. You'd be good at this, yeah. Good. Alright. The big idea or main thing that bugged me the most with this book was Susie's mother, Abigail. After her death, she became very distant with the rest of the family. And at first, you go, okay, that's alright, I understand you gotta cope some way. But once you find out that she's been sleeping around with the cop that has been interviewing people, then you go, okay, yeah, that doesn't quite seem right. I get it's a way to cope, but that doesn't seem like the right way to cope with it. And then once you find out she leaves for 7 years, that's where you go, okay, this isn't right. It just doesn't make sense to me as to why she leaves her family for 7 years.
She went to go get them.
She just picked up and was like, well, you guys are dealing with your death. I'm gonna go to California for 7 years. Good luck. And it just bugs me how she still has the rest of her life and rest of her kids and her husband who could help her out with this problem, but she decides to isolate herself and not quite face it head on, and just kind of tries to stay behind and not deal with it as much. That was just a big thing in me, because the family aspect of it, to me, if somebody was murdered, you'd think the family would become so much closer. Even if they'd probably go apart for a little bit, but then they'd come back stronger than ever. But with this, it seems that it just keeps fading and fading apart.
Okay, so Susie's heaven was like my big idea, the main thing that I thought of. Because when I think of a heaven, I think of like you're completely there, like there's no going back after that. But the way that they explain her heaven is like a purgatory, and how we were explained of a purgatory is like the halfway, like, oh, you're not bad enough to go into hell, but you're not good enough to go into heaven, so you have to like go to hell for a little bit, and then you can go to heaven. But Susie didn't do anything wrong, and so she was just kind of like stuck there for 7 or 8 years until Mr. Harvey dies, and then she kind of just like leaves and goes to heaven, and she doesn't stay with her family and like sees how they're doing, and yeah, she just stays there for 7 years, and it's not really her heaven, I guess, because she isn't fully there, I guess, yeah.
So my big idea out of the whole thing was like, what is like family basically? Because before Susie dies, it's normal. They have 2 parents who are financially set. They can provide, and the kids are all healthy and normal. They all go to school. And as soon as Susie dies, it like begins to like tear apart, and they tend to split off, and they don't speak to each other as much. And throughout the book, it just like makes you think, like, especially in Buckley's point of view, like you would think your parents are always there for you and always want to be there, but Jack becomes so overwhelmed with the case that he doesn't even like think of Buckley or really do anything with them. And Abigail, she just like takes off after things get hard basically, so she doesn't really know how to cope with it, and the whole thing just like seemed odd to me after reading it.
So it kind of seems like you've all taken a problem within the plot and emphasized that certain aspects of this story have a sense of unreality to it. So is your author trying to base this on what she feels it would actually feel like to be someone involved in that situation, or is she trying to do something else with it? Why might those problems with reality exist?
I thought that the main point of the book was really to show how different people cope with death, like how Abigail's mother probably wasn't the most moral right thing to do, but that's just her way of coping with things. And then with Lindsay, she used fitness and her boyfriend to get away with everything. Buckley kind of like secluded himself because I don't think it was his choice to be secluded. He was basically forced to be secluded because he didn't have anyone to be with.
And do people have different coping mechanisms?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that was basically the main point of the book. And like with the heaven, I think her viewpoint was just to show a different side of what people believe was what heaven is going to be like. And I guess what came to my mind was her heaven was kind of like the difference between Pandora and Pandora Premium. Like, you get like, the purgatory, her purgatory is like Pandora. You get to enjoy something, but then in order to get to Pandora Premium, you have to pay for it. and she had to let go of Earth. Like, that was her price. She had to let go of Earth and not look at anything in order to actually go to heaven, but she doesn't want to until the end of the book, so.
Does
No.
so how does George die? Just natural causes?
No, God, no. Well, so
Don't say.
I will.
So,
So basically, he moves away into, was it like the second or first person he killed, where he buried them, and then didn't find that the body was there. So he went out to like a cafe, and he tried to get another girl to like bring her home, and so he could rape and murder her. But then she's like, "No, go away, you creep." And so this parking lot was like on the edge of a cliff, and you know, like a ravine, and you know those cement.
Guardrails?
The cement like blocks that
So you don't
are
like drive
churches.
like what
Yeah.
they got at Family Dollar?
So an icicle falls, and that's really ironic because Susie says that that would be the perfect way to kill somebody because
Leaves
it
no
melts away.
fingerprints.
and then and so it falls on him, and then he like backs away to like try and brush it off, and then he just falls down and ends up breaking.
So-
Trips over the cement thing.
So, do
Falls
you
down the ravine.
feel that that's enough justice?
No, I
No.
hate
The way
I
he
hate
died,
the
is that
end of the book.
enough for you?
No, because they should have caught him first because they knew. Yeah, like they knew that he killed her, but they didn't find him yet because he ran away, and they knew that because he was connected to 2 other murders they found after Susie's, and yeah, I just feel like he should have been caught and then he should have died.
and then, so you mentioned a little bit, so after Susie, was there any more victims, or was it just?
I don't.
There was not.
It was
no more.
There was an attempted
He was-
one?
There
Kind
was
of
an attempted, but then he died.
He was kind of always on the run, but yet at the same time not.
Got 4 more minutes. Let's finish this up.
And then quotes we found, underrated, The Lovely Bones does a great job with revered, complex source material from Ian Freer from The Empire. And The Lovely Bones does have a unique charm of its own, more importantly, a story well told from Times of India.
Charmed.
So, do you agree with those or disagree with those? What do you think? Do you think the book was underrated and should have had more notoriety, or
I
not,
definitely
or
agree
what?
with the bottom one. The story well told. It's alright told, but it's still a very good story.
Does it keep you on your toes?
For the most part, there are some parts in the story where it kind of lulls you and just seems like they're putting in some fluff.
Like, for example, Ruth Connors. I have no idea why she was part of the story. I thought she was kind of a useless character.
Well, except for
when she got touched by... She got touched by Susie when she died, but other than that, I don't really...
yeah.
So it's so they can.
Anybody else? Do you feel it's underrated?
Yeah, kind of.
That more people should read it then?
Yeah, I feel like more people definitely... I didn't even know it was a book until you
Yeah.
mentioned something about it, so...
Yeah, it's been out there for between
2002.
2002, so
Yeah.
16.
I was gonna say 15,
Yeah.
but yeah, 16.
But no, it's definitely a really good book.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't like graphic content, then I don't suggest you read it.
It's got
Good.
some
So who do you suggest read this?
People who like the mystery type
Yeah.
things, like the thrillers.
and can handle their lunch.
Okay. Class, you have any questions for this group?
Nope, I do.
That's not
Right.
bad.
What, did he have a motive to go for Susie?
No,
Like, why
he just kind of
Susie?
he just picked somebody.
He didn't have
Why you didn't work Susie?
when he'd go after people, he'd have this urge
Oh, okay.
just to go after people.
It depends. Okay, so like in the book, it doesn't show a motive, but in the movie,
It's just hey, might as well kill you. You're here.
Did you all watch the movie?
Yes.
Yeah,
Fuck
it
as
wasn't
much as I
way better.
don't
than
watch the movie.
Good to know.
I can watch the
Well,
movie.
you can watch the movie, just don't read the book first, I guess. Because
So which one was better?
the book. Because the movie skipped around so much and it like
it was
left
like-
Well,
out.
then you don't
A
have to read.
cheesy sci-fi.
It was
The movie didn't even show that she had an affair.
yeah.
Wait, we're
It
supposed
just
to read the
switched.
book and not watch the movie?
Okay, thanks guys.
I was talking about the Bible.